Thank you. So the event today is going to be recorded. So if you need to get off and you're interested in what we talked about for the rest of the time, don't worry. So we'll share it with you all. It'll take us a while to go through introductions for 81 people. So if you're interested in sharing about yourself or learning about other people, please share your name, what university or institution you are part of or community in the chat box. We'd love to get that kind of information to learn a little bit more about you.
I'm just going to really quickly say that we forgot to transfer Northeast into the poll. So I'm sure a lot of you are from the Northeast. So just please put it in the chat box and we'll add it in.
Sorry about that. Yes. There's been a lot going on. So again, as I said before, please keep yourself muted just to prevent any additional background noise, unless you want to vocalize something, in which case raise your hand and then I will unmute you. And if you're having any technical issues throughout the event, let me know. Just message me directly in the chat, BRIGID. So great. We have a lot of Mid-Atlantic, which I expect is probably a lot of Northeast as well. And awesome, great. A lot of people affiliated with the university, but some that are not. And kind of a mixed response about whether recycling services have been affected by COVID in your community, which is interesting. So I'm curious to hear what Leana has to say about all of that. Oh, there we go. All right, so now to move on to our topic. So today I am joined by Leana Hauser. She is the Waste Reduction and Recycling Manager at Johns Hopkins. She works to engage all members of the JHU community to reduce the generation of waste and encourage the responsible reuse and recycling of materials on campus. She has been committed to sustainability issues for her entire career at Hopkins, which began in 2003, including receiving her master's in environmental science and policy from the JHU Advanced Academic Programs. Her dedication to protecting the health and the environment and the people in it began camping every summer and carried through to rural St. Mary's College of Maryland, where she earned a BA in public policy and continues ever stronger as a proud member and resident of Baltimore City. Today, she's going to be leading our discussion on what now? Rethinking waste in a post-COVID-19 world. So welcome, Leana.
Hi, thank you, Brigid. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. So yeah, this is our first Waste Less Wednesday social Zoom. So I think, this is like a refrain that we hear often on these Zooms. We're probably all getting pretty used to it, but Brigid and I have been pretty excited to really try to up our game when it comes to virtual engagement. So we're trying this out. So please bear with us. And I look forward to the continuing conversations that we're going to have over the next 10 weeks. Brigid was very ambitious when she decided to do 10 weeks, so it'll be fun. Okay, so I figured, let me just share my screen. I figured before we start, or to start, I should say, I would kind of just like kick off the series with what we thought we would begin with what we've all been so directly and indirectly impacted by, and that is COVID-19. But specifically for us in recycling and sustainability, how has it impacted not only our professional work, but also our personal life in regards to how we try to reduce our waste, recycle our waste, compost, donate, all of those things that we're all trying to do. So I thought I'd cover a little bit of a brief timeline of the changes and impacts to the policies, practices, and perceptions resulting from COVID-19. So let's start with before most of us were even told to go and stay home. So early March, before any stay-at-home orders were put in place, Starbucks announced it wasn't going to allow reusable mugs. And it was really funny because I don't frequent Starbucks that much, but I just happened to, on that day, go twice. And so, I rolled up to Starbucks in the morning, hadn't heard anything about not being reusables. I don't read signs, shame on me, but I stroll up to the counter. I'm like, here's my mug. And the person was like, I'm sorry. And she points to the sign and tells me that they are not allowing reusables. They're putting a pause. I totally get it. Okay. Everyone's like kind of freaked out. We don't know what's going on. So unfortunate, but I get it. So later that afternoon, I had a meeting at Starbucks. Again, not normally a 2 times a day Starbucks person, but I went in and I was having a meeting in there. I knew they had ceramic mugs. I knew I couldn't bring my reusable mug. So I asked, hey, can I have my latte or whatever in one of your ceramic mugs? To which he pointed to the sign and told me that they couldn't use reusables. I was like, oh, duh. It's not just me and my mug that I'm personally bringing to you that who knows when the last time I washed it was. It was actually anything that would go between the patron and the staff person, So anyway, that was sort of like the first sign, like, okay, well, what are we going to see coming down the pike here for, I mean, obviously the bigger pressing issue was safety for everybody, but like, it was sort of a little bit of a light bulb that we were going to start to have to think about how this was going to impact, the work that we do and the things that we care about so deeply. So, so then, we move on to a little bit farther into March, and we start to see that the impact of COVID-19 is beginning to have on our residential collections. So in March, a lot of cities began to suspend their residential collections, including bulk waste was one of the first things that we had in Baltimore. And that a lot of that was to, minimize the extra labor that was required for doing bulk collections and really focus on the high priority issues of trash, recycling, and in some communities, curbside compost. And then other communities, cities did see declines in suspensions in curbside or in drop-off centers. And, a lot of this is due to a range of issues, including safety concerns around the transmission on materials. So, as you see, like our Murphs in the processing facilities, they're touching these things all day long. They're also, which we know now that there is a less of a risk on transmission through materials, but we really didn't know. So additionally, the Murphs, if you've ever been into a Murph, the individuals working there are standing very close. So in order to maintain social distancing, they had to spread apart, which means that there was less capacity to process these materials, which caused some problems down the chain. Also, there were reductions in workforce due to illnesses. And one thing that I really didn't think a lot about was inmate labor. So a lot of recyclables are processed with inmate labor, and that was suspended because of the high rates of transmission or the high probabilities of transmission in prisons. And then of course, budget constraints. So unfortunately, recycling and maybe other recycling, composting, services provided by your city or municipality are seen a lot of times as an extra. So the focus has been on really on that trash component. And so a lot of cities have decided to suspend their recycling collections so that they can save on their budgets. As of June, 108 municipalities suspended their curbside recycling in some capacity, but 41 have resumed since. And if we had this discussion, today's Wednesday, if we had this discussion on Monday, I would have said that Baltimore's recycling collection had not been impacted. But sadly, just yesterday, it was announced that our curbside recycling is going to be suspended for 3 weeks. And the worst reason, which is that there has been an outbreak of COVID-19 in one of the city's sanitation yards. So again, it really brings home the fact that our colleagues, our friends, the people that we work with, the people that we depend on to do our jobs, whether it's within our institutions or the vendors and other groups that we work with, are very vulnerable. And they are essential. And so, so in Baltimore, we will be suspending our recycling for 3 weeks, hopefully only 3 weeks. In addition to curbside programs, 8 states suspended their container redemption program, so their bottle takebacks. However, it was just announced that Massachusetts, New York, and Michigan will be resuming those in June. Plastic bag bans that were set to go into effect were stalled or suspended in California, Maine, and New York, and additionally in cities like Boston, LA, San Francisco, and Seattle. However, Oregon, Montgomery County here in Maryland, and Chicago have not suspended those bans. And I, you know, we can talk later. I'm really interested to hear people's thoughts on, you know, talking about the perceptions and the realities of these dangers, and what role industry has to play, particularly the plastics and petroleum industry may have to play in pushing some of these suspensions. So now we're seeing a lot of the country open up, reopen, particularly restaurants. And I'm glad to see that Alex from Plan is on the call, because I will be leaning heavily on them and refer to them on a lot of the great work that they're doing, getting up in front of these perceptions of safety. But the CDC has developed guidelines for safely reopening that will impact the waste generation. So they're recommending avoiding using or sharing items that are reusable, such as menus, condiments, food containers. They're recommending using disposable, or the Green Restaurant Association and the CDC are thinking about ways to reduce waste too. So they are recommending, you know, digital menus that people could scan a QR code at the table or when they enter, so that they don't have to print and dispose of all of those menus. But food service items like utensils and dishes and napkins and tablecloths, all of those things are recommended. They do have some guidelines for if that's not an option. I do think, though, that a lot of restaurants, just out of sheer just how busy they are, and just out of the highest, most safety, that they probably will lean more towards using disposables. So, and then finally, for many of us, this past month would have been one of our busiest months of the year, where we would be holding our move out programs. I'm aware of some schools that were able to offer some form of their usual move out donation program. That's amazing. It's awesome. Like, I was so happy to hear that people were able to have some sort of donation program, but most of us, including Hopkins, had to cancel ours. For Hopkins, you know, students left at spring break, then they didn't come back. And so they have these windows to come back and pack everything up, and just given circumstances, the lack of staff, the lack of space, the lack of time, we were not able to implement any of our collection programs. I know of a lot of other schools that were not able to either. So so that's really unfortunate. That's like one of our big signature programs that we partner with our Office of Sustainability, our Green Move Out program. And so that was really unfortunate. You know, it's just a testament to how you know, when these things occur, we have got to really think about what is currently the priority, and then as we move through this pandemic, lean on groups that can provide better science and data for us, so that we can hopefully move through this in a way that uses science and not fear to or industry influence to do what's best for our for environment and for our health and safety. So I know there's a ton of other impacts to the waste reduction and recycling world that have occurred over the last 3 months, but I think I'd like to really shift to the interactive piece of the Zoom today. So I came up with a couple of questions just to get the discussion started, but I do welcome you to ask us what you'd like to talk about as it relates to COVID-19. So if you have questions as we go along, again, use the chat box. And as Brigid mentioned, if you'd like to share your thoughts on a particular topic, you can raise your hand, use the raise the hand feature in the participant box. Or if you don't want to talk and you just want to write your answer or your comments in the chat box, that's fine as well. And we will we'll try to get to that, and we'll try to unmute you so that we can hear you. It's a little bit hard with 87 participants. It's exciting. But hopefully we can have a nice, robust conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we don't need to see that anymore. So the first question that I wanted to pose to the group, and I'll kind of share my thoughts, Brigid will share her thoughts, and then as we go along, you guys can, again, use the chat box or the raise hand feature. So my first question is, have your perspectives and or practices changed around waste since COVID-19, and how? And so I would say that for me, you know, I think one of the brightest spots of working from home has been having lunch at home. Instead of like that frantic rush in the morning to throw everything into a container and bring it to work, we're actually cooking things that we may not have cooked. We are finding things in the refrigerator that may have gotten forgotten and got tossed. And so I'm seeing a lot less food waste in my house because we are utilizing those leftovers more, and we can be a little bit more creative and repurposing. While we can't use reusable mugs, there's a lot fewer of us going out and may forget our mugs. So hopefully there's less single-use plastic being generated currently. However, what we'll talk about in a little bit later is, what happens when we return to some of those spaces that we were in before, and people are forced to use single-use plastic and not able to use the reusables. I'm definitely shopping differently, so especially in the beginning, it was like, go to the grocery store and buy what you need for a month and then don't go back, and so I don't normally shop at BJ's or bulk stores like that, but we found ourselves going there so that we could buy larger amounts, which meant that I was getting things with more packaging. And so that kind of changed my waste stream, things that are not acceptable in my recycling, like clamshells and such. And while we do use Hungry Harvest, I am not going to the farmer's market as much because it stresses me out, to be quite honest with you. It just was too much. So unfortunately, there's some of the packaging waste from food coming from there too. And lastly, like, I still use my reusable bags, but instead of bagging my stuff in the grocery store, I just put it back in the cart, and then I take my cart out to my car, and then I bag it in my car, and then I put the cart back. So those are some of the things that I have, that have changed for me personally. I know Brigid was going to share some thoughts, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat box. Like, what are you doing differently, or how are your feelings around your waste generation at home since you've been there? Brigid, you're muted.
I just realized that. Thank you. I will jump in for a second. Yeah, so I totally agree with you there. I have a 7-month-old baby at home, so I'm noticing are generating a lot of waste at home that we normally wouldn't have, and maybe it would have just been waste that we would have created in other spaces, like at work or at daycare, but right now it's all generated at home, so it's really obvious right now, and that's just kind of making it difficult. And kind of like Leana was talking about earlier, I have been kind of struggling with some guilt, because on the one hand, I want to go and support my local coffee shops and small businesses that are trying to stay open, but at the same time, like, I hate not being able to bring my own cup, and I live where styrofoam is not been banned yet, and so there are some places that are still offering styrofoam for takeout containers and stuff, and it's really hard for me. So we'd love to go through some of your opinions and thoughts right now, if anybody has anything to share.
A lot of it is around shopping.
Yeah, so, shopping bags. I love it.
Well, that and just like how people are shopping differently.
Yes.
And packaging. And then some suggestions for some really great resources, documentaries, Plastic Wars, which Brigid and I were thinking about doing a watch party for. And of course, The Story of Stuff, which is a classic.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone interested in vocalizing any of their thoughts or anything like that? We have a lot of questions that I can move through, but I don't want to miss anyone's thoughts on this topic. Again, this is hopefully going to be interactive.
Hi, this is Sarah. I hope you guys can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, great. I've actually felt like I was not recycling more, but I was being more or less wasteful actually during COVID because of being home a lot, not having to buy a lot of, like, if I were to buy something from outside, not having packaging that comes from that. In terms of the grocery store, I think another thing that's kind of affected this less waste or zero waste movement is the fact that all of the and like in Whole Foods, all the bins that were you could first like go in and put in your own jar or like a paper bag, those are all closed off. So now you have to buy like it in the plastic containers. And so that's just one difference I've seen. But I think in my own or practice, I feel like it's kind of a mix. At home, I'm recycling more and using less, but at the same time, I'm trying to, you know, still figure out ways to stay inspired, whether that's like looking at YouTube videos about how people are trying to go zero waste. And the other hard thing for me is everything has to be, or I feel like a lot of things have to be shipped now. So there's also like a lot of boxes and packaging wasted that way. And no one's really open to take donations either. So these are kind of some of the stuff I've experienced during this past few months.
Yeah, Leana, can you chat about your experience or what you've heard from organizations as far as donations?
So I did see the question about donations, and so internally at Hopkins, you know, we have suspended a lot of our collection. I know a lot of people depended on our TerraCycle collection, but because Brigid and I are working from home, all of our buildings are on lockdown. You know, it's really not feasible for us to collect a lot of those items. So I would urge people, if you are at Hopkins or if you're at any other place where we're actually going to have a plug for our TerraCycle webinar that we're going to have at the end of the month. But there's lots of programs that you can participate at home, or there's collection sites in communities that may still be running. However, if you have space and you want to collect those kinds of things, to continue to do so at home. If you're, you know, we collected pens and energy bar wrappers and all those kinds of things. So we will pick those back up when we are able to have the staffing, et cetera, to be on campus. In terms of our surplus programs, you know, again, it's dependent on whether or not we have staff to collect those things and hold on to them. But, you know, our furniture program will eventually be back up and running. We recognize that people have budget constraints, and so they're very likely going to need to be cost effective if they have to buy new things. And so we're hoping that they'll rely on our surplus program. I did get a question from, I think, Ann Haskins a while ago about Goodwill and the Baltimore Goodwill. Goodwill Chesapeake is opening back up as an organization. However, that's all dependent on each city's rules. So I know Baltimore County was opening up, or maybe not Baltimore County, a few of the counties in Maryland, their Goodwill locations were opening up for donations. So I would say go check those out. And it's just gonna be all individually based by organization and or nonprofit, but ultimately by your city's rules on what phase they're in for opening up, so.
Cool, and I just saw somebody was commenting about, like, this isn't directly related to what you're talking about, but dehydrating and pickling and growing their foods and things. And, you know, one of the things that I've known is I spend almost 3 hours a day commuting to work. And so getting back those 3 hours, you know, one of the silver linings of being able to be at home is I get to spend so much more time making my own food, preparing things. I feel like I actually have energy to, you know, spend more time pickling and doing some of those other things that normally I wouldn't necessarily do. So, you know, this whole working from home thing has had its benefits as far as me being able to reduce my waste because I have more time and energy and focus and availability to do that.
That's a perfect segue, Brigid, to our next question.
All right.
Which I don't know if you were able to share the
I'm going to do it
about
right
polling.
now.
So we're going to try out another type of polling, and Brigid's going to share information about that, but it won't be the traditional Zoom poll. So are you putting it in the chat?
Yes, yes. So I'm putting something in the chat. It says pollev.com/recycling JHU 782. So and put it into your your internet, and I'm going to share my screen as well to show you what it should look like. And we're gonna do like a little word cloud thing.
So basically the question that I was going to ask, which is the Poll Everywhere cloud tool, is so what have been some of the positive impacts of COVID-19 on recycling and reuse? And I say that with like the most realizing that that's, you know, I guess silver linings, not positive, but what are some of the things, and we've all kind of started to share those things, that now that we're home, what are some of the bright the silver linings of being at home on our recycling and reuse, and then what are some of the negative things that we've seen? We've all mentioned a couple of them. Again, I'll say like less single use since people aren't going out as much. But again, there's the fear that when we return, there will be strict, whether it be because of people's fears of the materials that reuse, that people might be transferring the virus between those materials, which we're hearing from science and from the CDC and other guidelines, that there's a very low rate of transmission through materials. It's mostly airborne. And so I'll look to Alex and other folks that plan to share some information that they know about that. But it also, I think, will be the social distancing piece. So when students return, when staff return, there's going to be very limited, I think a lot of the scenarios show that there'll be very limited interactions. So I know that when we had students on campus this past spring, the ones who were not able to go home, they could only do takeout. So they would go to the dining hall and they would grab a to-go box and they would go back to their rooms and basically be secluded. So by the sheer reality of the social distancing issue, there was no ability to sit down with plates and spoons and forks and knives and use those reusables. And so so that's been a negative impact. And then again, I kind of like lean towards plan. I think one of the potential positives is that I think we're really going to be looked at to be in the forefront of that science and collecting that science on the risks related to reusables and donations. So I don't know if Alex, if you want to jump in real quick and just share some of the work that you've done and as it's ever evolving around the safety issue with reusables.
Yeah, thanks. So I just dropped the link to the blog post and the toolkit. The really brief summary on this is, I think the easiest way for us to put this, for anybody that is kind of concerned about, reusables as a vector, in terms of, the virus being transmitted via reusables, is the FDA has established a process for many decades that requires food service facilities to sanitize what's referred to as like the warewashing practices. So, dishes, utensils, cups, etc. There are many communicable diseases, bloodborne pathogens that exist out in the world. We all have been eating off of reusable dishes for our entire lives, and that has been safe. This doesn't really change that for us. And what this toolkit kind of gets to is that the moment that we're in right now requires us to think kind of beyond the question of reusable versus disposable and more into the questions of like, what is the system? So for example, if your campus switches to disposable prepackaged food, say salads that are then placed in a cooler, and your concern is around people self-contaminating. So touching something that's contaminated and then touching their mouths. And they go and they open that cooler door that 300 other students have touched before them, having that food in a disposable or a reusable container doesn't really matter. So the issue that campuses now need to address is around the system, not necessarily the dish. The dish isn't the vector, it's the system around the dish. So traditional self-serve buffet lines are going to be a challenge. Drink stations are going to be a challenge. Condiment dispensers are going to be a challenge. They're not impossible. And there's guidelines in there around like what a safe system would look like for self-serve stations. But I would imagine a lot of campuses are going to start thinking about what, redesigning dining systems will look like to have staff directly serve students. That toolkit also has guidelines in there around how to sanitize reusable stuff. So, furniture, electronics, etc. So if you all have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Don't want to hijack this, but the resources are there and happy to talk to anybody.
Thanks, Alex. Brigid, did you share I was not looking at the screen. Did you share the
so
board
I got the poll out. So this is the results. So
and this is before pre-COVID.
So this is the pre-COVID. We haven't done the post-COVID yet. I'll send out the post-COVID in a second. So I'm assuming backstep actually was supposed to be for post-COVID, but which is fine. But I love the rest of these words, sustainable, fun, necessity, eco-friendly, thoughtful, intention, prepared. That's awesome. So now I'm going to send out this second one.
So while Brigid does that, I'm just gonna ask the next question, and just to also say in terms of time, it's 4:39, and Brigid and I were kind of like, again, this is our first one. We weren't sure if we should go a full hour or we should go 45 minutes. So we kind of thought, well, we'll go 45 minutes, and if we go beyond that and people have to check out, that's fine. If you want to stay on, we're totally available to stay until 5, and maybe the next time we'll actually make it a full hour because there's always a lot of housekeeping stuff. But either way, I have two more questions that I'd like to pose. So hopefully you can stay on. If not, we totally understand if you need to check out. But I think one thing that I'm wondering, I have to say that being at home, we have, everything that Brigid and I did, not everything, but almost everything that we did was in person. And a lot of the programming that we did, we supported events, we supported our furniture reuse program, all of that has been shut down. And so we're sitting at home going, okay, like how needed are we? Are we expendable? And then thinking about in terms of when we go back, will people see our work as more critical after post-COVID? Or will there be, the resources and priorities around safety and budget recovery overshadow or threaten our efforts, or the perceived risks? Will it overshadow what we can bring to our institutions? And I think also, in the Office of Sustainability, I see some of my friends, Jason and Jess, sorry if I missed anybody else, I didn't see your name, but talking about in a macro level, how do we take this moment in time and really, bring in the conversations that people have been having since they've been home around what this means for sustainability and some of the really huge benefits that we're seeing as we change the way we live and work. So I was really relieved to hear that our provost on our Sustainability Leadership Council Symposium really reiterated the university's commitment. I flat out asked the question, what does this mean in terms of, our budget crisis and all the things that we're going to face when we come back to campus. And he very strongly said that he's reiterating the university's commitment to sustainability. So that was really heartening. I was glad to hear that. Again, we're kind of going back to some of the things that might hopefully be short term when we return when it comes to waste. But I also think even more so, and I'm looking at you, Ann Haskins and Louisa, I think people are really valuing the services that we provided when we were on campus, and now people are home and they can't, or it's very difficult for them to participate in those things. So I'm thinking, in terms of, did I just get lost? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh my God, I can't see Zoom anymore. Sorry. There you are. Okay. So I thought I got disconnected. So, people would use our campus resource. They would bring their TerraCycle items to us. They would compost on campus. They would do all of these things that they couldn't do at home. And so I think those services that we provided, hopefully will be more valued. And I think at home, I think it tells us that we have this opportunity to go to our elected officials and say, look, these are services that are provided by private institutions or by smaller, you know, like colleges, universities, but not universally to all of our citizens. And so I think that we have a role to play, and I think our work hopefully will be seen as more critical as we all start to, you know, rethink what our world should look like after, you know, this experience that we've all had.
No, I totally agree with everything that you've been sharing, Leana. And that's honestly the hard parts, is not being able to do so many of the things that we're used to doing on a normal basis. So in some ways, it is easier for us to reduce our waste at home, but there are other things that are not happening at the same time that we can't do to reduce our waste. And it's not available to the public, and it's not accessible. So if you're not like necessarily thinking about it, it's not the thing that you're going to be able to easily add into your routine. So I'm liking, so we've got a lot of results coming in about words that you would associate with using reusables post-COVID. Sanitize, which I really like. Contamination, wash, disease vectors.
Necessary.
Yes, yes, dirty and hard, and depressing. I would agree. I think, I'm wondering, I love necessary, you know, how long it's going to take for us to get to a place where it's not just sustainability minded people are encouraging and are using reusables post-COVID. You know, I don't know how long it's going to take for the general public, other than in restaurants and places like that, to start using them again. But I hope so.
Does anybody want to unmute themselves?
Crickets. All right, well.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
If you guys want to stick around. Otherwise, again, I think, you know, we've loved having you. It relates very similarly to what we were just talking about, but I want everyone to kind of think about, again, and I sort of hearkened on this a little bit, but how can we harness the lessons that we've learned working and schooling at home to change the culture? So again, there's practices, there's things that, you know, we are all doing, but there's a culture shift that has to happen. And, you know, how do we do that? What are the lessons that we've learned? And I would say, first and foremost, I have learned how important our waste handling staff are, whether it is, you know, at Hopkins or the folks that come down my alley twice a week, and now only once a week, because so many of them have gotten sick because they're essential. They weren't necessarily provided with the necessary PPE. And so I think that, like, coming out of this, like, what are the ways that we can really support and change the ways that those staff who are so critical but also so vulnerable, how are they being treated either in our cities or in our institutions? And I would couple that with you know, with racial injustice. So since so many of our staff at Hopkins are African American, and in other parts of the country, maybe Latino. But in general, a lot of people of color are being disproportionately affected and are absolutely seen as being essential. And that would include like other industries as well. And so I just, you know, want to kind of have people think about, like, you know, there's a lot of things that we've learned during this time, and we have a great opportunity to harness that. So I'm curious as to what anyone else is thinking about how, either individually or as an institution within our offices, how can we really, you know, garner this energy and momentum?
I feel like everybody got that air quality is really benefiting from all this. You know, we all saw those amazing pictures from space of, you know, big cities and that look much nicer now. But I feel like what happens to the landfills is kind of still not quite, and how it might have gotten worse through this crisis. It's not really in all of our, you know, awareness really. And I feel like we need some kind of a anti-packaging, anti-plastic revolution. I know it's already going on, but we kind of really, everyone needs to understand that we need to change something about that as well. And then the threat of glass not being recycled anymore, possibly down the line. I know this is already happening at Hopkins, and Baltimore City is still taking it, but who knows how much longer. So if you want to avoid plastic, but then you cannot do that by, you know, doing like buying more glass stuff, then this is really like, it's almost impossible to, you know, do something good. So I don't know, I think this is one thing that I feel it has really, I've grappled with that a lot, trying to do my usual like recycling, e-cycling, TerraCycling, all that, and that's not possible anymore. And what do we do about it? Like, we need to move away from all that stuff.
I think that kind of, you know, for Hopkins, you know, we have our Sustainability Leadership Council, and I'm on the procurement working group. And I think that is, you know, when we think about our individual actions, you know, we tend to like guilt ourselves so much. I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And while I think we all need to do our own individual part, like we are a part of a system, and even Hopkins is a part of a larger system that has to change. I think, you know, and you can probably, you know, connect that to a lot of things where, you know, individual action really does matter. Behaviors matter, but really ultimately it has to rise up to the systems that are in place that are perpetuating a lot of, whether it's waste generation or what have you. And so I think that that's sort of our call to action, is really, you know, using our voices and demanding that these systems have to adapt, because we're all realizing that when we have a pandemic like this, a lot of things fall apart. And if the systems were in place that we didn't have to rely on individual action, then you know, we'd be able to like adjust and pivot, but still continue on with a lot of the positive things that we were already doing. You know, if we had greater accountability from manufacturers and from the industry and that kind of thing. So
that was actually what I was going to add to Luis is, and I don't know how we necessarily go about getting that greater accountability, but if I feel like and I'm hoping, the hopeful side of me is that we are in this like Renaissance period. I mean, who knows if in 50 years we look back in the history books that we've written, that like this has been a pivotal time for justice, for racial justice, for environmental justice. I mean, all of these good things, but I think we're really going to be facing a just more disposable society. I think there's this fear with everything, regardless of what science tells you. Like, people are going to be fearful of items that they touch, and they're going to be clinging to single-use products a lot firmer than they were before. So I think it really is going to be up to the manufacturers to, like, it's time that we demand that they produce more responsible products. And like we have this like clash of like sustainability. We have so much momentum going, but how can we demand that they produce more responsibly, more sustainably? And, you know, and companies are responding to that. I mean, you see, and granted, it's probably because of my cookies in my computer and everything that I look up, but, you know, I mean, there's companies left and right producing like degradable things and compostable things. And, you know, it is happening. It's just somehow we've got to collectively demand that companies are more responsible with the things that they're producing. And, you know, obviously you vote with your dollar. I say that to students every day. I say that to people every day. I believe it firmly, but, you know, collectively, I think we have that power. We just have to harness that power now.
No, I agree so much with what you were saying, Megan, and thank you for sharing, and the same to Louisa. And I think it's going to be really important that we do communicate these messages and ideas with our students and the staff and the communities that we are working with. One of the things that I want to question the whole group is, especially right now, as you know, we've all been working at home and staying at home for the majority, you know, and something as small as taking out your own trash. So I know, like, coming at this completely from a custodial recycling perspective for a moment, one of the things Leana and I constantly are like talking about is, can we get rid of desk trash cans? So I'm wondering if, you know, we've spent now 3 or 4 months working at home, taking away our own personal trash every day. With this, as we move forward and whenever we're back on campus or back in our own offices, is this like the perfect time to take away everyone's trash cans and make them like walk to the communal like waste station and, you know, reduce the amount of trash we're creating as a group? Anybody have thoughts or anything on that? Like it, thumbs ups.
I think that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. And I do think that, you know, as we return, you know, there may be some limitations on going into individual offices and handling all that stuff. So it may be one of the benefits of the extra precautions that people might take because of COVID-19. But I think you're right. You know, we do our own trash at home, but like normally it's like spread out, and now it's like, wow, how do I generate all this stuff, or like the amount of dishes that you're doing every single day because you're eating 3 meals a day. But I think you're right. Like that's sort of like that, whoa, wait a minute, like why have I expected everybody else to do this for me when I could just get up and walk? And I think there are many of us that don't mind, but I think we all know in academia some of the challenges that we have in making those kinds of expectations for some folks. So I think that's a really good point. I will mention before we wrap up that if you're following what's happening in Congress right now, there is the federal Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act was introduced in February. So I think that a lot of us are seeing this happen in our local state government or in our local city governments, where we're banning particular items and materials like polystyrene or bags, or you know, really pushing for bottle bills and those kinds of things. So it's really, I have no optimism that anything will get passed. It'll come out of the House probably. I don't imagine that anything will happen on the federal level anytime soon, but it's really refreshing to see that these kinds of bills are getting pushed. And just because what it does is it brings it into the forefront of our conversation. And every year that it gets pushed and then it fails, then it's just another year that we can say, like, you know, look, we've been trying to push for this for so long, and people keep hearing it. So I just wanted to put that out there, that it does exist. And so if, you know, you have the time to follow up with your local representatives, you can support legislation like that, either locally or federally.
Kathleen, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I had recently read a really good book called The Story of More by Hope Jaron. And it was all about how we got to our this massive consumer culture where we just buy more and more stuff and produce more and more stuff. And it covered all sorts of angles, the packaging, the kind of food we eat, the kind of food we grow, how things are distributed. And it had, the last chapter was focused on what action you can take as an individual and also as a group. Actually, a group first, and then as an individual. And some of the things, you know, I'm very much, you know, about recycling and reusing and all of that. But, you know, I've never had taken the time to go through my investments that I have for my retirement and stuff and look at what companies I'm supporting. And that might be actually a lot more impactful than, you know, how many aluminum cans I recycle.
Kathleen, can you remind us of the author?
Things like that I hadn't thought about.
What was the author's name?
Hope Jaron, Jahren.
Thank you.
She was a professor here at Hopkins for a little while.
Okay.
And then she moved to Hawaii, and then she moved to Norway.
Okay.
She's been on a lot of top book lists, including Obama's climate change book list, and
I just put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
I did. I just put it in there. Yeah.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she also wrote Lab Girl, and that was awesome. And my claim to fame is I used to be her dog walker when she lived here.
That's awesome.
The audiobook is also great. That's what I did for Earth Day. I got the audiobook and did some gardening and listened to the book on my phone while I gardened.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Kathleen. I'm going to check
And
it out.
unlike The Uninhabitable Earth and some of the other climate change books that are just really a downer and difficult to read because the news is so bad, this one had a little bit, I mean, it was very truthful and very science-based, but it did have a little bit more of an optimistic tone.
We need that.
Yes.
We definitely need
For
a dose of that.
sure. For sure.
Awesome.
All right, well, I am going to start wrapping up here because we have gone over, which I kind of expected. But thank you all for staying with us so long. You know, I'm putting out a second set of polls for just some feedback for us. You know, as we said before, this is the first time we're doing anything like this. Leana and I really just felt like we wanted a place where we could share ideas and talk about things that we kind of felt like were issues that we were experiencing in our own little worlds, but also as a collective. And we really enjoyed getting to talk with people from GH and other communities. So we really hope that you will join us again next week. I'm going to share my screen real quick and just give a plug for our speaker next week. And if I can find my share screen. So our speaker next week is going to be Kathy Leibowitz, and I apologize if I am pronouncing your name wrong. And it'll be next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Kathy Leibowitz from College of Holy Cross, and we're going to be talking about the relationship between waste reduction and service and volunteers and kind of anything that kind of falls in that realm and anything else that may be going on or other things that pop up, like, you know, the fact that recycling was just suspended in Baltimore again or somewhere else. I know College of Holy Cross is not in, so hopefully this conversation will be a little bit broader than just our little local world here. Again, if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to comment on @Homewood. That's our social media handle, or send me an email later. Thank you again for coming, and have a great rest of your evening, and be well, everyone. Thank you all.
All right, thanks everyone. Do you want to stay on?
Yeah.
Hi, Jenny.
Hey, I thought you might want to say hi to Brandon.
Hi, cutie.
Brandon's here too.
Aww.
He thought the talk was interesting, so he was listening also. Did you turn it back to screen sharing? I don't see you
Hey,
guys.
Jenny,
Oh, hold on. I will stop screen sharing.
Jenny, did you see that one of our topics is going to be kids and parenting waste?
I did. Yeah. I have things to share. And actually, just this weekend, I got a bunch of toys from a friend, like passing them down.
Awesome.
Yeah. Leana, do you have kids too?
I have a 9-year-old boy.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Cool.
So I am swimming in Legos and figurines and all kinds of stuff.
I think one thing that could be cool at Hopkins is to do like, you know, like Facebook, there's like those trades and lists.
It's free and for sale, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a Homewood, trading at Homewood kind of thing.
Yeah. That would be good. I know there's a student one, but a staff one would be great.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
We were looking into doing a free sale in the fall with everything that was collected in the move out. And there is an online, it's free and cheap stuff that the Hopkins students will sell amongst themselves.